The Pinecrest Estates sign gleamed in the morning sunlight as we drove through the gates for the first time. Perfect lawns stretched before perfect houses with perfect mailboxes, all painted the exact same shade of forest green. I remember thinking it looked like a movie set, too flawless to be real. My mother smiled beside me, her breathing slightly labored from the excitement of moving day. Her retirement dream had finally come true. "This is it, Alex," she said, squeezing my hand. "Peace and quiet at last." I helped her unpack her medications first, the daily inhalers, the emergency backups, the prescription bottles that managed her severe asthma. She had lived with compromised lungs since a childhood illness, but she never complained. Not once. Not even when an attack would leave her bedridden for days. "Where do you want these?" I asked, holding up her inhaler case. "Bedside table, kitchen counter, and my purse," she replied, a routine she had perfected over decades. "Cannot be too prepared." We were barely finished unpacking when the first HOA welcome packet arrived. 57 pages of rules, regulations, and restrictions. My mother read every word, determined to be a model resident. The doorbell rang 3 days later, and there stood Charlene Moore, HOA president, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Margaret, is it?" she said, looking past my mother into our home. "I just wanted to welcome you personally and remind you about the garbage bin placement. Yours is 6 inches too far from the curb." My mother apologized and assured her she would correct it immediately. But I saw something in Charlene's expression, a flash of displeasure when my mother did not seem sufficiently intimidated. That was strike one, though we did not know it yet. The warnings began the following week. First, it was about my mother wearing a hoodie while watering her new rose bushes. "Inappropriate attire visible from the street," the notice read. Then came a citation for leaving a garden hose uncoiled in public view for 30 minutes. Each violation carried a fine, each fine slightly larger than the last. "This is ridiculous," I told her, watching her write another check to the HOA. "They cannot micromanage what you wear in your own yard." "It is not worth fighting," she said softly, though I noticed her hand shaking slightly as she sealed the envelope. "I just want to fit in." But fitting in became increasingly impossible. At the monthly HOA meeting, my mother raised her hand to ask about the community garden project mentioned in the newsletter. Charlene cut her off mid-sentence. "New residents should observe for the first 6 months before making suggestions," she announced to the room. "We have established procedures here." My mother's face flushed, but she nodded politely and sat back down. Later that night, I heard her coughing. Stress always triggered her asthma. I made her tea and sat with her until her breathing stabilized. "There is something not right about that woman," I whispered. "She is just protective of her community," my mother replied, but I could tell she did not believe her own words. The situation deteriorated rapidly after my mother received permission from the landscaping committee to plant native flowers in her front garden. Somehow, Charlene overrode the approval, claiming the specific shade of purple would destabilize neighborhood aesthetic cohesion. When my mother attempted to show Charlene the written approval during an impromptu confrontation on our lawn, things escalated. My mother's voice remained steady, but her breathing grew labored as Charlene's tone became increasingly hostile. "Your aggressive attitude is precisely why we have these rules," Charlene snapped, loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Security." A man in a polo shirt with HOA security embroidered on the chest approached quickly. My mother reached for her purse, pulling out her inhaler as her chest tightened visibly. "That is not approved," Charlene said sharply, pointing at the inhaler. "All medical devices must be registered with the HOA for public use." "This is my prescription," my mother wheezed, her fingers tightening around the inhaler. The security guard hesitated, looking between them, but Charlene nodded firmly. "Confiscate the unregistered item." I rounded the corner just in time to see the guard taking the inhaler from my mother's trembling hand. Her eyes found mine, filled with confusion and growing panic. Her lips parted, struggling for air, as Charlene stood watching, clipboard in hand, making a note with cool detachment. "This is assault," I shouted, running toward them. "She cannot breathe." This is policy enforcement, Charlene responded calmly. She can retrieve her property after filing the proper paperwork. I rushed my mother inside to her backup inhaler, holding her steady as she took desperate puffs. Over her shoulder, through the window, I could see Charlene still standing on our lawn, watching our house with an expression I can only describe as satisfaction. The formal warning arrived in the mail 3 days after the inhaler incident. Printed on official HOA letterhead, it detailed my mother's confrontational demeanor and refusal to comply with safety protocols. Not one word about stealing a medical device from a woman in respiratory distress. Not one acknowledgement of the danger they had put her in. "This is insane," I said, packing our living room. "They could have killed you." My mother sat quietly at the kitchen table, her backup inhaler now never leaving her sight. "They are trying to provoke us," she replied, her voice unnervingly calm. "They want us to give them a reason." She was right. Charlene began appearing near our house with alarming frequency. Morning coffee on the bench across the street. Afternoon inspections that always seemed to route past our driveway. Once I caught her photographing our garbage bins from multiple angles. When I confronted her, she simply smiled. "Just documenting compliance issues," she said pleasantly, as if we were discussing the weather. "Your mother seems to struggle with understanding our community standards." The neighbors noticed everything but said nothing. Mrs. Abernathy from 2 doors down whispered, "I am so sorry," as she hurried past us at the community mailboxes. Mr. Chen from across the street left homemade cookies on our porch with a note saying only, "Stay strong." But when we asked directly for support, suddenly everyone had pressing appointments elsewhere. "Why is everyone so afraid of her?" I asked my mother. "Because she has something on all of them," she answered, looking out the window thoughtfully. "Control is rarely about rules, it is about secrets." I contacted the local police after receiving our second warning letter, this one threatening to place a lien on our property for accumulated violations. The officer who took my call sounded bored. "HOA disputes are civil matters," he explained. "Unless there is physical violence or criminal trespassing, we cannot get involved." "They took my mother's prescription medication," I insisted. "She has severe asthma." "Did you sign the HOA agreement when you moved in?" "Well, yes, but—" "Then you agreed to their governance structure. I suggest hearing an attorney if you feel the rules are being applied unfairly." Desperate for ammunition, I began researching HOA law. I requested copies of all Pinecrest Estates bylaws, regulations, and meeting minutes. What arrived was a 4-inch binder that revealed the true extent of Charlene's domain. Residents could not have bird feeders. Children could not play outside after 7 p.m. Holiday decorations required pre-approval and could only be displayed for exactly 10 days. The rules weren't just strict, they were nearly impossible to follow completely. "Look at this," I told my mother. "It says lawn ornaments are prohibited, but 3 houses on this street have garden gnomes." "Selective enforcement," she nodded. "Classic intimidation tactic." "And this, no unapproved gatherings of more than 4 non-residents without board permission. That is actually illegal. They cannot restrict freedom of assembly." My mother watched me with an odd expression, half proud, half concerned. "What?" I asked. "They are targeting us specifically," she said, "and the more we push back openly, the worse it will get." That night, Charlene herself knocked on our door. She stood on our porch with 2 security guards, holding a clipboard and wearing what I can only describe as a victorious expression. "We have received noise complaints," she announced, though our house had been silent all evening. "I will need to inspect the premises." "Do you have documentation of these complaints?" my mother asked, her voice strangely formal. Charlene's smile tightened. "The HOA is not required to disclose complainant information." "Then you do not have permission to enter my home," my mother replied, starting to close the door. Charlene's foot shot out, stopping the door. Denial of a compliance inspection is grounds for immediate fine assessment. I expected my mother to back down, to avoid another confrontation. Instead, she opened the door wider and looked Charlene directly in the eyes. "I understand control mechanisms, Charlene," she said softly. I understand power displays, and I understand exactly what you are doing. Please remove your foot from my doorway. Something flickered across Charlene's face, surprise, perhaps even a moment of uncertainty. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She withdrew her foot and stepped back. You have been warned, she said, but her voice lacked its usual authority. As my mother closed the door, I saw a glint in her eye I had never noticed before. A hardness, a sharpness that seemed completely out of place on my quiet, bookish mother. Mom, I questioned. It is time I told you some things, she said, leading me to the kitchen table. About who I was before I was your mother, about what I used to do. The photographs my mother pulled from the locked box in her closet showed a different woman than the one I had known all my life. In them, she stood straight-backed in professional attire, her expression focused and intense. In one, she shook hands with a man I recognized from history books, a former FBI director. I was not always a librarian, she began, arranging the photos methodically on our dining table. That came later after your father died. My world tilted sideways as she explained. For 23 years, my mother had worked in FBI counterintelligence. She had tracked foreign agents, built surveillance operations, and managed high-risk assets across 3 continents. The quiet woman who made me chicken soup when I was sick had once been responsible for dismantling an entire industrial espionage network operating out of Seattle. I met your father on an assignment, she continued. When you were born, we agreed one of us needed a quieter life. He stayed in the field. I became a librarian. But all those years, I stammered. I wanted you to have a normal childhood, she said simply. After your father was killed in that car accident, keeping you safe became everything. The fewer people who knew about my past, the better. I sat back, struggling to reconcile this new reality with the gentle mother I had always known. Why are you telling me now? She gestured toward the window, toward the neighborhood beyond. Because what Charlene is doing I have seen before. Different scale, same tactics, isolation, intimidation, information control. This is not just an overzealous HOA president. This is someone who knows exactly how to establish and maintain dominance. My mother reached for her reading glasses, suddenly looking more like the strategic professional in those photographs. And she picked the wrong target, she added. The next morning, everything changed. My mother brought home specialized audio recording equipment, small, discreet devices that could capture conversations from remarkable distances. She installed security cameras that looked like ordinary outdoor fixtures. She began documenting every interaction with the HOA in meticulous detail. Always follow procedure, she instructed me as we set up our command center in the spare bedroom. Every form filed in triplicate, every communication recorded, every rule followed to the letter. When Charlene called to discuss our attitude issues, my mother put her on speakerphone and responded with carefully chosen legal terminology. I watched in awe as she led Charlene through a verbal maze, getting her to make contradictory statements about HOA policy while never once raising her voice. But the bylaws you mailed us specifically state on page 42, paragraph 3, that medical devices are exempt from registration requirements, my mother said pleasantly. That must be outdated documentation, Charlene stammered. I have the signed and notarized copy right here, delivered by your office 3 weeks ago, my mother continued. Would you like the document number? The frustration in Charlene's voice was palpable. For once, she was the one off balance. After hanging up, my mother turned to me with a smile that reminded me of the woman in those photographs. Confident, calculating. How did you do that? I asked. Information advantage, she replied. Before any confrontation, no more than your opponent thinks you know. Over the following days, I helped her place audio devices near the HOA office, concealed in everyday objects. We documented security personnel entering properties without permission. We photographed selective rule enforcement throughout the neighborhood. Are we breaking laws? I worried aloud one night. No, she replied firmly. Everything we are doing is legal, ethical, and justified. We never strike first. She paused, looking at the growing evidence wall we had created. But we will finish this completely. For the first time since moving to Pinecrest Estates, I slept soundly. My mother, my quiet, asthmatic mother, was not just fighting back. She was executing a counterintelligence operation against a neighborhood tyrant. And from the determined look in her eyes, Charlene had no idea what was coming. People like Charlene leave fingerprints, my mother explained, spreading documents across our dining table. Not physical ones, historical ones. She had been researching for weeks, quietly, methodically building a profile of our HOA president. What she uncovered was fascinating. Before Pinecrest Estates, Charlene had been the HOA president of Lakeview Gardens, 30 miles away. She had resigned abruptly following what newspaper articles vaguely described as financial irregularities. Before that, she had worked for Summit Realty until her license was suspended for 6 months for undisclosed ethics violations. She moves from community to community, my mother observed, establishing control then extracting value. I studied the financial records we had obtained through a formal request to the HOA. Look at these maintenance fees. $20,000 for landscape remediation, but no company name, no invoice details. And here, my mother pointed, monthly payments to CM Consulting for regulatory compliance. CM, Charlene Moore. She is paying herself consulting fees from HOA funds. We worked like investigators, connecting threads of information. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Charlene had systematically targeted specific homeowners for aggressive enforcement, usually elderly residents, single women, or families with language barriers. Those who stood up to her found themselves buried in violations until they either paid enormous fines or moved away. Our breakthrough came from Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly widow who had whispered support to us weeks earlier. She appeared at our door after dark, looking over her shoulder nervously. "I should have spoken up sooner," she said, handing my mother a sealed envelope. "But I was afraid." Inside was an audio recording from her phone. Charlene's voice was unmistakable. "Mrs. Abernathy, at your age, do you really want the stress of fighting this? Pay the special assessment and these violation notices disappear. Push back, and I will make sure you spend your remaining years in litigation." My mother thanked her with a gentle hug. "You are very brave." "She threatened to report me for elder self-neglect if I complained again," Mrs. Abernathy whispered. "I have lived here for 30 years. After she left, my mother's expression hardened. "That is not just unethical, that is criminal coercion." Our surveillance efforts intensified. We set up cameras facing our yard and the street beyond. Within days, we captured footage of Charlene entering backyards without permission, photographing through windows, and once, attempting to open a neighbor's shed. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Mr. Patel, who served as HOA treasurer, contacted me at my workplace. "I cannot be seen speaking to you," he said hurriedly, sliding a flash drive across the coffee shop table. "But this is wrong. What she is doing is wrong." The drive contained financial records showing systematic embezzlement, HOA funds diverted to personal accounts, fake vendor contracts, inflated maintenance costs with kickbacks. Small amounts from each homeowner that added up to significant fraud over time. "Why now?" I asked him. "Why help us?" "She is getting bolder," he replied. "And your mother," he hesitated. "There is something about her that scares Charlene, I can see it." That evening, as we added Mr. Patel's documents to our evidence wall, another warning notice appeared on our door. This one claimed our surveillance equipment constitutes invasion of community privacy and demanded immediate removal, along with a $2,000 fine. "She knows we are watching her," I said. My mother nodded calmly. "Good, that means she is getting nervous." The next day, 3 more violation notices arrived, each more absurd than the last. Our grass was allegedly 1/4 inch too high. Our mailbox paint was non-compliant despite being the exact shade in the HOA guidelines. We had failed to obtain permission for a bird that had built a nest in our tree. "She is escalating," my mother observed. trying to bury us in paperwork and fines. What do we do? I asked. My mother gathered the notices into a neat folder, adding them to our growing evidence collection. Her expression reminded me of the photographs from her FBI days, focused, determined, unflappable. We have enough, she said simply. Now we move to phase 2. Which is what? She smiled, a smile I had never seen before. Not angry, not vengeful, but resolute. The smile of someone about to spring a trap years in the making. We bring in reinforcements. The certified letters went out on Monday morning, 17 of them, each addressed to a different agency or oversight body. State HOA Regulatory Board, County Prosecutor, Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, Banking Commission, Real Estate Licensing Board, City Code Enforcement. Each package contained selected evidence tailored to that specific agency's jurisdiction, all meticulously organized and documented. In intelligence work, you never rely on a single pressure point, my mother explained as we sealed the last envelope. Systems protect themselves, but if you apply pressure from multiple directions simultaneously, the system breaks, I finished. Precisely. We had also retained attorney Sarah Washington, a former prosecutor who specialized in HOA disputes. When she reviewed our evidence, her eyebrows rose progressively higher. This is unusually thorough, she commented, flipping through our documentation. Most clients bring me angry letters and verbal complaints. You have brought me a case file worthy of federal prosecution. Will it be enough? I asked. More than enough, she assured us. The question is not if you will win, but how badly they will lose. Charlene's retaliation came swiftly. That very evening, a trespass notice was taped to our door, claiming my mother had been seen attempting to enter the HOA office after hours. The notice was accompanied by a grainy, unidentifiable photo that could have been anyone. She is getting desperate, my mother observed, adding the notice to our evidence file. She knows something is coming. The following day, while my mother was collecting our mail, Charlene appeared with 2 security guards and a police officer. That is her, she declared dramatically, pointing at my mother. She threatened me yesterday and has been stalking my home. I watched from the window, heart pounding, as the officer approached my mother. To my surprise, she smiled warmly at him. Officer Rodriguez, she said pleasantly. It has been, 15 years? The officer stared in confusion, then recognition dawned. Agent Harper, Margaret Harper. Retired now, she confirmed, but yes. Charlene's expression faltered. You know each other. Margaret trained half my department in evidence procedures back in the day, Officer Rodriguez explained, his formal demeanor softening. Best instructor we ever had. My mother handed him a thin folder. I believe these surveillance photos and witness statements will clarify the situation, Officer Rodriguez. He reviewed the contents, his expression growing increasingly serious. After a brief conversation with my mother, he turned to Charlene. Ms. Moore, these allegations appear unfounded. Furthermore, I have concerns about the potential filing of a false police report. Charlene's face reddened. She has been violating HOA regulations systematically. That would be a civil matter, he replied coolly. But harassment and filing false reports are criminal matters. As they departed, Charlene fuming, the security guards avoiding eye contact, my mother walked calmly back to our house. I met her at the door. You knew the officer, I said in amazement. I taught at the academy for 3 years after you started college, she replied. Connections matter. That evening, an emergency HOA board meeting was called. Despite not being invited, we attended, taking seats in the front row. Charlene glared from the podium as she announced the agenda. Proposed eviction proceeding for persistent rule violations. Board members shifted uncomfortably when they noticed us. Charlene pressed on, presenting a slideshow of our alleged violations, each one meticulously documented in our evidence file as either fabricated or selectively enforced. When public comment opened, my mother stood. Charlene tried to skip her, but Mr. Patel, the treasurer, insisted on following proper procedure. "My name is Margaret Harper," my mother began, her voice steady. "Before addressing these allegations, I would like to inform the board that as of this morning, 17 regulatory agencies have opened investigations into Pinecrest Estates' HOA financial and management practices." The room fell silent. "Additionally," she continued, "these agencies have received documentation of systematic harassment, selective enforcement, financial improprieties, and possible criminal conduct by certain board members." Charlene's knuckles whitened around the podium. "That is defamation. You cannot prove any of this." My mother smiled, the same calm, confident smile I had seen in those FBI photographs. "On the contrary," she replied, opening her folder. "We have documented everything. Would the board like to see evidence of Ms. Moore entering homes without permission? Or perhaps the audio recordings of her threatening elderly residents? Or maybe the financial records showing HOA funds diverted to her personal consulting company?" Board members exchanged alarmed glances. Charlene's composure cracked visibly. "This meeting is adjourned," she declared, gathering her papers hastily. "Actually," Mr. Patel interrupted, "I move that we continue this discussion. I believe we need to address these allegations immediately." As Charlene stood trembling at the podium, I watched my mother calmly take her seat again. For the first time since we had moved to Pinecrest Estates, I saw fear in Charlene's eyes. The Queen was losing her crown, and everyone in the room could see it happening. Sunday morning arrived with unusual stillness. Neighbors who normally avoided us now offered tentative waves. Word had spread about the board meeting confrontation. The carefully constructed facade of Pinecrest Estates was developing cracks. My mother and I were enjoying coffee on the front porch when a car screeched to a halt in front of our house. Charlene emerged, followed by 2 security guards. Her face was contorted with anger as she marched up our walkway. "You think you are so clever," she snarled, loud enough for neighbors to hear, "turning the board against me with your lies." My mother set down her coffee cup. "Please lower your voice, Charlene. This is a residential area." "Do not tell me what to do on my property," Charlene shouted. "This is my property," my mother corrected calmly. "Nothing in Pinecrest Estates belongs to anyone but the HOA, Charlene hissed, stepping onto our porch uninvited. "I built this community. I protected it from people like you." Neighbors began emerging from their homes, watching cautiously from driveways and sidewalks. Some had phones in hand, recording. Mr. Chen crossed the street, moving closer. Mrs. Abernathy stood at her mailbox, witnessing everything. "You need to leave now," my mother said firmly. "Or what?" Charlene stepped closer, her voice dripping with contempt. "You will call your friend Officer Rodriguez, file another complaint. I have survived dozens of homeowners like you." She turned to address the gathering crowd. "This woman is trying to destroy everything we have built, our property values, our standards. She wants chaos." My mother stood, straightening to her full height. Something in her posture changed, a shift so subtle yet profound that even Charlene paused momentarily. "You have harassed residents, embezzled funds, and violated multiple state and federal laws," my mother stated, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "Your security personnel confiscated a medical device, endangering my life. You have filed false reports and engaged in systematic intimidation." "Prove it," Charlene sneered, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. My mother reached into her purse and withdrew a leather wallet. With deliberate slowness, she opened it, revealing a badge that caught the morning sunlight. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Counterintelligence Division, retired," she announced clearly. "I specialized in identifying and dismantling systems of coercion and control." Charlene's face drained of color. The security guards exchanged glances and took a step back. "You cannot intimidate me with some old badge," Charlene attempted, but her voice had lost its force. "The badge is simply identification," my mother replied evenly. "What should concern you are the 17 open investigations, the forensic accountants currently reviewing HOA finances, and the class action lawsuit being prepared by Attorney Washington on behalf of 34 current and former residents. Phones recorded everything. The entire neighborhood watched as Charlene's carefully constructed authority crumbled in real time. "This is not over," she threatened weakly. "It was over the moment you took my inhaler," my mother responded. "Now please leave my property before I add trespassing to the list of charges." Charlene backed away, nearly stumbling down the porch steps. As she retreated to her car, neighbors remained silent, watching. No one followed her. No one supported her. The spell of fear she had cast over Pinecrest Estates had been broken by a single badge and the strength of one woman who refused to be intimidated. That evening, our doorbell rang continuously as neighbors came forward with their own stories and evidence. Mr. Patel brought complete financial records. The Johnsons from down the street shared footage of security personnel entering their backyard without permission. Mrs. Abernathy brought 3 elderly friends who described systematic intimidation tactics. My mother listened to each of them with the patience and precision I now recognized from her intelligence career. She took notes, organized evidence, and assured each person their voices would be heard. "Were you really FBI?" Mr. Chen asked in awe. "For 23 years, my mother confirmed, before I became a librarian." "A librarian with the soul of a warrior," Mrs. Abernathy added with unexpected fierceness. By midnight, our evidence wall had expanded to cover the entire dining room. The community that had been fragmented by fear was uniting in pursuit of justice. And at the center of it all was my mother, not the quiet, retiring woman I had always known, but a strategist who had spent decades preparing for precisely this type of battle. The HOA board called an emergency meeting the following day. Charlene was conspicuously absent. The meeting was brief and decisive. A complete audit would be conducted, a temporary management company would be brought in, and all recent fines would be suspended pending review. By week's end, Charlene resigned. The investigation into financial improprieties continued. And my mother, who had once hidden who she truly was to protect me, now stood recognized for exactly who she had always been, a woman of extraordinary strength and unwavering principle. 3 months passed quickly. Spring arrived at Pinecrest Estates, bringing new growth and, remarkably, new hope. The HOA remained, but under completely new leadership. Mrs. Abernathy now served as board president, with Mr. Chen as treasurer and rotation of other neighbors filling remaining positions. The rule book had been reduced from 57 pages to 15, focusing on maintaining property values without micromanaging residents' lives. My mother declined numerous requests to join the board. "I am truly retired now," she told them gently. "My work is finished." Instead, she turned her attention to our garden. Where security cameras had once monitored our every move, sunflowers now stretched toward the sky. She planted lavender to attract butterflies and created a small seating area where neighbors regularly stopped by for conversation. The legal consequences for Charlene were substantial. The forensic audit revealed over $200,000 in misappropriated funds. Criminal charges were filed. Civil lawsuits proceeded. She sold her house quietly and moved away, leaving behind a community slowly healing from years of her control. One evening, as my mother and I sat in our garden, Mr. Patel stopped by with a thick envelope. "The final settlement," he explained. "All improperly assessed fines have been refunded. Your record with the HOA has been completely expunged." My mother accepted the envelope with a nod. "Thank you, Vijay." After he left, she opened it briefly, verified the contents, then set it aside without further interest. "You are not even going to count it?" I asked. "It was never about the money," she replied simply. The next day, she donated the entire amount to the Neighborhood Improvement Fund. The money that had once funded Charlene's control now would build a community playground and garden. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now greeted us warmly. Those who had remained silent during our struggle now apologized, explaining their fear. My mother accepted each apology with grace, never once reminding them of their inaction. "Forgiveness is strategic," she told me when I questioned her. Communities cannot heal without it. I watched her transform again, not back into the quiet librarian I had known, nor remaining the hardened intelligence operative she had revealed herself to be. Instead, she became something new, a blend of both sides, wise and strong and finally free to be her complete self. On a perfect autumn morning, exactly 1 year after moving to Pinecrest Estates, my mother sat on our front porch wearing her favorite hoodie. She breathed deeply, inhaling the crisp air without struggle, without fear, without an inhaler clutched desperately in her hand. "Are you happy here now?" I asked, joining her with coffee. She smiled, watching children playing freely on lawns that once had been forbidden territory. "I am. Even after everything that happened." She considered this, her eyes distant with reflection. "Justice matters," she said finally, "but so does what comes after. This," she gestured to the transformed neighborhood, "this is what I fought for, not just to end something bad, but to make space for something good." From across the street, Mrs. Abernathy waved cheerfully. Mr. Chen's children rode bicycles on the sidewalk. A new family was moving in down the block, greeted with genuine welcome baskets rather than rule books. My mother took another deep breath, savoring it fully. In that moment, I understood what she had truly won for herself and everyone else. Not just the absence of tyranny, but the presence of community. Not just the right to exist without harassment, but the freedom to thrive with dignity. She had turned a battleground back into a home, and finally everyone could breathe easy.